Mike, thanks for joining us. And I know I always ask a lot of people about minor league stories to start. You have a different background. How about a scout story for me to start for your early days of getting into professional baseball?
Hey, Ryan, thanks for having me on, first of all. I started off my career as a scout for the St. Louis Cardinals, and my first year, I was living and working in Texas. Didn't know anyone there. Spent the year in the Midwest and driving around Texas, and then in the following year, they had a opening in the Mid-Atlantic region where I'm from. So I moved back east and helped cover the Carolinas and Virginia and parts of the Northeast. And I didn't have New Jersey. Actually, this is 2 years after that. So this is 2009. The Cardinals were picking like 25th in the draft. And there was a 17-year-old kid in South Jersey that we liked. There was some controversy about him. Not like in a bad way. I just mean, there's different opinions. The Cardinal staff was pretty high on him. We thought he could get to our pick. And Jeff Luno, who was the scouting director at the time, asked me to go watch him. I hadn't seen him. I wasn't on at the East Coast Pro Showcase circuit. So I went cold to watch Mike Trout. And it was the game was at Atlantic City High School. Which I don't think there was a fence at the field, and in the background you could see the casinos, and the opposing. I forget the name of Mike's high school. I'm drawing a blank, but the opposing team was in Atlantic City High School. The pitcher was throwing, I would say, 71 miles an hour with an arc on it, and Trout popped up all three times. There was no batting practice because it was rainy, and I don't think they had a turtle there. There was no. I talked to his dad. I came out of there and I said, I have absolutely no opinion on this player. I couldn't even begin to register an opinion watching what I saw. He popped out three times. It was non-existent opposition. And so we went into the draft room, and I think we were picking 25th. You could look it up. And Trout was definitely in the Cardinals' first 25 players on the board, meaning he was like a yes for the pick. I want to say we probably had him like 15th or somewhere really strong where we thought we could get him. But we put Shelby Miller over him. We were very excited about Shelby Miller. We did not expect him to get to us. Our area scout, Ralph Carr Jr., did a good job. He did a lot of homework on Shelby Miller, despite everyone thought Shelby Miller was going to go like in the top 10 or 12 picks. And sure enough, he fell, as high school readies sometimes do. And we were very excited about him, and we took him. And it wasn't a bad pick by any stretch. At the bottom of the first round, you get Shelby Miller. It's great. He ended up being a good prospect and pretty good big league career. But we passed on Mike Trout. And I guess my part of the story is though I saw him, I came out of there with absolutely no blood on my hands with that decision. So I'm proud of that. And, it could have been a different outcome. Cardinals were very close to taking him. Obviously, we're happy with the Shelby Miller pick. You don't get him all right, but turned out to be one of the best draft picks of all time. And it's a close call for the Cardinals.
See, I didn't know that that's where you're going to go with that whole story. But also, to be fair, wasn't the only team that passed on Mike Trout. And also, when you're at a high school game and that's your first look at a guy, that's a really hard assessment. But you were honest about the hey, I don't have an opinion or take on this. Also goes to show you how unpredictable the draft, can truly be. And that's why there's so many rounds, and that you might have someone in line and it might work out, it might not. But man, okay, so I just got to know moving forward, Mike, I got to just keep coming to you with these scout stories. So next time I talk to you, I'm going to need another one. That was phenomenal.
It takes a while to dig them out of my brain, but there's a few in there.
I would say so. You were like, beforehand, you're like, I don't know if I got to look. And then whammy, that one just comes out there, Mike Trout. Yeah, I'm curious. I know you have a lot of baseball expertise. We'll dive into the rest of it now. Safe to say, hasn't been the best start for the squad, and baseball is so challenging in so many different ways. Adversity strikes in different ways. Injuries haven't been friendly to the squad. I've talked to a lot of different people. In your opinion, to start off, and maybe as a GM here, I know that this weighs on you as a whole. Could you just kind of touch on what it is on the day-to-day that you kind of assess, and maybe even past the number side of it? But I do know you personally, this is something you have a lot of pride in, and I know it's not reaching the standard that you're hoping.
Yeah, as we're talking right here, I mean, we're off to an incredibly disappointing start. Had very high expectations going into the season. I think the rest of the league had high expectations for us, and to come out of the blocks with a bad record, just a lot of things going wrong everywhere you look. It's been really rough on all of us. We pour ourselves into this team. It's everything we do every day of our lives, and to have something like this happen to start the season, it's very rough. And you start to self-reflect, and things that you could do differently, things that you'll do differently going forward. But also the reality of it is we've had a lot of bad breaks too. We have a tremendous amount of talent on the injured list right now. Some of those are freak injuries, guys break a thumb or something like that. And I do think we have a lot of our young hitters, or a few of our young hitters, that are kind of front and center. If you look at their expected statistics, which we have nowadays, I think they're hitting into some bad luck. But the rotation's been bad, like a lot worse than I think anyone expected, and that's put us behind the 8 ball a lot. And then our lineup just hasn't been clicking. And then we've had injuries, and this is all coming on the heels of 2 really good regular seasons, but 2 playoff disappointments. So it's not something to sugarcoat. We're in a spot right now that we do not want to be, and we feel terrible about it. But we do have time on our side, and we've got a lot of talent on the field and in the organization, and we will put our weight behind figuring this out and trying to get our record better and put ourselves in a position to get back where we belong, which is in the postseason play. But, we definitely have our work cut out for us, and it's been a crappy start.
Yeah. And there's no one way to go about it. Last year, Houston was off to an awful start, and people thought that was the end of their run in the AL West. They turned around. The Mariners then, who led that division for a while, they fall apart. So time is there. And at least for this month, as we talk about, I think the only team now that has a record over 500 is the Brewers at 1 game over 500. So if a month that could be a moving month is May, we'll see how the rest of it plays out. I've talked to a lot of different people on how do you assess of being aggressive for the next move. Talked to Mark DeRosa about Bobby Cox always said 40 to 50 games. I was told growing up, hey, we got to get to June and see where we're at. Where do you kind of assess when, not saying you have to make a more excessive decision, but you have to maybe the room for error, then you have to kind of change your philosophy or thought process?
I think it's a little more art than science, and especially, with the expanded playoffs, that's given every team a lot more opportunity, and I think a lot more hope. And that is a factor. The old adage predating the expanded playoffs, I think, was around like Memorial Day. I think I'm watching this team every day. I'm following this team. We're managing this team every day. And my focus right now is just day to day, getting things right, getting guys healthy, trying to get some semblance of our rhythm back, which has been escaping us. And there's just no way around that. So we're just going to keep doing that. And my focus is on that. And I'm very optimistic that we're going to get back to a level of play that's much more representative of the talent level on this team and the way we've been the last few years. So, I'm not at a point of worrying about later in the summer yet.
And I agree with that. It's just always interesting hearing the thought process. And the expanded playoff, too, is a big part of it. And in the American League East, Fortunately, too, it's not like anyone's running away with it either. The Yanks are, 4 games over 500 as we talk about this, Zach. Everyone else is hovering below and trying to get their footing. And, yeah, I think it's safe to say the Birds, the position players, arguably, it's the most talented young core, but there's different variables. I think we talked about that last year, Mike, if I'm not mistaken, I think you use words like forecasting when doing it, and that's a little bit above my analysis of how I can define it. But one thing that we did talk about is you don't know, and it's a little bit unpredictable. But you guys have a potential at each position as a position player to have all-stars. When you're looking at a young Jackson Holiday, who I'm really happy to see his progression. Then guys like Westberg, that's banged up, but he's an all-star type player. Kowser's out. Adley, Gunner, the list goes on. Heston getting a chance. But one thing that I feel like I've seen is that they've maybe pressed a little bit, and maybe that they are dealing with a little bit more expectations. And I talked to Kyle Stowers about this recently, and Stowie was even saying he had a hard time dealing with that. Do you think that's fair to say with some of these guys? They've had so much success in their lifetime, and now they're expected to be the top dogs. Do you think that plays into figuring out how they can be prolific big leaguers at this day and age?
Yeah, there's no question it's a different mode mentality when that starts to happen. And it did happen for this team last year. And, I think we've had tough luck in the playoffs. And, if that had gone differently, it's probably a lot different feeling. And so we're all feeling that right now. But I think the time has passed, or it's passing, for that to be a theme that should continue. There's way too much talent here, and I don't think that this is going to go on forever, where our hitters are pressing, where we're having a tough time stringing good at bats together, and having half of our starting lineup missing right now is not helping matters much. And that happened in the second half last year. But this is definitely a game that's played by human beings, and those things can affect players. And, our expectations for ourselves and this team are really high. And right now we're not meeting them. And it's a grind, but that's something that we have to work through on a day-to-day basis. And the excuses kind of stop.
Mm-hmm. Well, and that's, like you say, excuses stop. The reality is, whether people like this answer or not, no one's going to feel sorry if the Orioles have 20 guys on the IL, 2 guys on the IL, whoever's available. That's what you have. And we can talk about, hey, pitching hasn't been up to the standard that you want. Guys have been injured. If you're not winning games, that's winning cures everything, right? And when losing happens, more issues come up. And that's just the way it is. And you know that, I know that. And I hope, being a guy from Baltimore, and I know how much you took this job because you wanted the opportunity to bring a championship to Baltimore. And I know it's not going the way you want, but there's a lot of time going on moving forward. And you've had, fair to say, over the 7 years we wrap up here, 7 years now, right? I'm not losing my mind on how many years you've been here in Baltimore.
Yeah, I think this is the 7th season. Came in at, for the 2019 season.
Okay. Seventh year. You've experienced a lot throughout your entire career as a scout, assistant GM, but I always say that there's something that you learn each year. I guess over the last year, what is something that maybe you have learned as a GM or just being around in this position that has kind of maybe helped you or made you think a little bit differently moving forward?
I've learned a lot. I learn a lot all the time, but this last year and the struggles that we've experienced, really going back to like June of 2024, we just kind of stopped playing. We've been the winningest team in baseball. I think still are to some degree. And, we've been in such a rhythm from the latter half of 22 through the first half of 2024. And it just started to dissipate last June. Mm-hmm. And, we had to assess and react, and we're still in a mode of not playing well and not having that rhythm. There's so much that I've experienced in the last year that I think all of us have learned from, but baseball is very unpredictable. I never would have imagined the degree of injuries that we've had with the position player group that we've had, and the need to retain depth in that area versus on the pitching side. I mean, it's something that I just did not see coming. And there's you're told things. You learn things by listening, by reading, but until you experience stuff, it's really that's the best way to learn, because that really leaves a mark. So yeah, we've had a lot. There's been plenty of learning experience last year. I guess that's the positive of the way we've been playing. But I really believe in the talent of this group and the makeup of this group, and I think that we're going to get back to playing the way we were leading into that stretch, and we're just working at it, and hopefully it's coming.
I hope so too, right? I think that's what everyone wants. At the end of the day, being from someone from this area, Mike, people are proud of Baltimore and of the Baltimore Orioles, and all they want, and just like you, they just want to see their team that they care about make a run. And the reality is the Orioles have a lot of time, not off to the start that the team wants, but far from over here. And hopefully if those young guys can get going and some guys can get healthy on the pitching side, it can work out. And it's a reminder, value-wise, for everyone that you sign. I was going through that list. It can be a crapshoot of who turns out. You try to evaluate who you want. I was seeing like Jose Quintana is having a great year to start the year. Nick Pivetta, Paul Goldschmidt, which to the Yankees' success, Mike, that's turned out well. But you never know what's going to happen. And all you got to do is hope with what you have right now in place, and you trust the guys that you do have. So I appreciate it. And I got a last thing on the way out. What's your scouting report for yourself when you were coming out of college?
You don't want to hear that. It'd be
none of that. Okay.
Ugly way to end the segment.
Okay.
Yeah. Thanks, Ryan. We're working at it, and this group is grinding away.
All right. I appreciate it, Mike. Thank you.